Maid hid her son in the billionaire's basement. What he found when he finally went down to clean it didn't just shock him, it broke him completely. You see, wealth is supposed to buy peace, but for Julian Vance it only bought echoes. His sprawling estate sat on 50 acres of manicured lawns and silent corridors, a monument to a life so full of money and so empty of warmth that even the dust seemed afraid to settle. For 3 years, the only soul who seemed to understand the quiet rhythm of the house was Clara, the night maid. She moved like a shadow, efficient, unassuming, always keeping her head down and her hands busy. She never complained. She never asked for favors. She simply existed in the margins of Julian's world, polishing silver, folding linen, and disappearing before the sun rose. But Julian began to notice things. Small things at first. A plate of half-eaten toast left on the kitchen counter in the morning. A faint, rhythmic coughing echoing through the floorboards when the house was completely still. The heavy basement door, which he had kept locked for years, was always slightly ajar when he passed it on his evening walks. He told himself it was just faulty hinges. He told himself it was just his imagination. But the house has a way of keeping secrets, and secrets have a weight that eventually pulls you down. It started on a rainy Thursday, the kind of day where the sky feels like it's pressing down on the roof. Julian decided it was time to finally tackle the basement himself. The contractor had canceled, the storm was worsening, and a persistent draft was creeping up the stairs, carrying with it the faint smell of antiseptic and old paper. He grabbed his coat, picked up a heavy flashlight, and descended. The wooden steps groaned under his weight, each one sounding like a warning. At the bottom, the air was cool and still. Boxes of forgotten furniture lined the walls. Old holiday decorations sat stacked in plastic bins, but then he saw it. A section of the far wall had been cleared. A worn mattress lay on the concrete, covered with clean, faded quilts. A small wooden stool held a stack of children's books and a single, flickering battery lamp. And beside it, a plastic crate filled with neatly folded clothes, all too small for a grown woman. Julian's breath caught. This wasn't just storage. Someone had been living down here. Living in the dark beneath his feet while he slept in silk sheets above. He stepped closer, his heart hammering against his ribs. That's when he saw the notebook. It was resting on a makeshift desk made from an overturned crate. He opened it, his fingers trembling, and began to read. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, the kind of writing that belongs to someone who doesn't get much time to write but chooses every word like it matters. It was a journal. Date after date, entry after entry, written by Clara, but this wasn't a maid's journal. It was a mother's. She wrote about the cold, but also about the safety. She wrote about the long hours upstairs, the exhaustion, the way Julian sometimes looked at her with pity instead of recognition. She wrote about Leo, her son, 5 years old. Born with a rare cardiac condition that required constant monitoring, expensive medication, and a quiet, secure environment. She wrote about the man who had fathered him, a man who saw a child only as a burden and a woman only as an obstacle. He had threatened to take Leo, to use him for leverage, to drag them both into a legal nightmare neither could afford. So Clara had run. She had taken the night shift at Vance Manor because the basement was forgotten, secure, and hidden from the world. She had hidden him not out of malice, but out of desperate, terrifying love. Julian dropped to his knees. The concrete was unforgiving, but he didn't feel it. He was staring at a photograph tucked between the pages. A little boy with wide, curious eyes and a crooked smile, sitting in a patch of sunlight that must have come through a high basement window. He looked frail. He looked beautiful. And on the back of the photo, in Clara's careful script, it read, "He thinks the house is a castle. I tell him a prince lives upstairs. He asks when he'll get to meet him." The words hit Julian like a physical blow. He had spent years building walls, signing contracts, accumulating wealth while convincing himself that he didn't need anyone. He had treated his own staff like furniture, invisible and interchangeable. And all this time, beneath his feet, a mother had been giving up everything to keep her son safe. She wasn't stealing. She wasn't scheming. She was surviving. She was loving. And Julian had been so blind he hadn't even noticed the heartbeat of his own home. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Light, hurried, panicked. Clara appeared at the bottom, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched a tray of medicine vials. She stopped dead when she saw him. The flashlight beam cut through the dim air, illuminating the terror in her eyes. She dropped the tray. The vials clattered against the concrete, but neither of them moved to pick them up. "I'll pack," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We'll leave. Please, don't call the police. Please, sir, he's all I have." Julian stood slowly. He didn't look angry. He didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man who had just been handed the mirror he'd been avoiding his entire life. He walked past her, not toward the stairs, but toward a small, curtained partition near the back wall. He pulled it back. There, curled on a thin blanket, was Leo. The boy was asleep, his chest rising and falling in a shallow, labored rhythm. An oxygen concentrator hummed quietly in the corner. A small nightlight cast a warm glow over his face. He looked so small, so fragile, so entirely alone in a house that had everything except warmth. Julian turned back to Clara. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face, bracing for the worst. Instead of calling security, he knelt beside the boy. He reached out, his large, calloused hand gently brushing a stray curl from Leo's forehead. The boy stirred, blinking open his eyes. They were clear, bright, and completely unafraid. "Hi," Leo whispered, his voice raspy but soft. "Are you the prince?" Julian swallowed hard. His throat felt like it was closing. "Yes," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "I am. And I'm sorry it took me so long to come downstairs." He stood up and looked at Clara. "You don't need to pack. You don't need to run. I'm not here to evict you. I'm here to help." The words hung in the damp air, heavy with a promise neither of them expected to hear. What followed wasn't a simple fix. It was a dismantling of pride. Julian called his personal physician first thing in the morning. He arranged for specialists to evaluate Leo, for the best treatments to be flown in, for the oxygen equipment to be upgraded to hospital grade. He moved them out of the basement and into the east wing, a suite with large windows, warm rugs, and a door that didn't need to be locked. Clara cried when she saw it. Not out of gratitude, but out of relief so profound it left her breathless. She had spent so long bracing for impact that kindness felt like a foreign language, but Julian was learning it too. He started eating breakfast in the dining room with them instead of alone in his study. He learned how to read Leo's favorite stories. He discovered that wealth meant nothing if it couldn't lift the weight off someone else's shoulders. He even found out that Clara had been quietly saving every spare cent to pay for Leo's surgery, skipping meals, working double shifts, mending her own clothes so she could buy him vitamins. She had been giving everything to a house that didn't know her name. The real turning point came 2 weeks later when a legal letter arrived. Clara's ex-husband had tracked them down. He demanded custody, threatening lawsuits, claiming negligence, painting himself as a concerned father. Clara panicked. She packed a single bag, ready to flee into the storm again. Julian found her at the front door. He took the bag from her hands and gently placed it on the floor. "You're not running anymore," he said, his voice steady, unyielding. "I've already spoken to my attorneys. We have medical records, witness statements, proof of abandonment, and proof of your years of quiet, unwavering devotion. He's not getting near Leo. Not while I'm breathing." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the strength that had been forged in the dark. "You didn't just hide him from him. You protected him from a world that doesn't know how to be gentle. I won't let that happen again." The court case was swift. The evidence Julian's team gathered was overwhelming. The judge awarded Clara full, permanent custody. The ex-husband's claims were dismissed as harassment and greed. When the verdict came down, Clara didn't celebrate. She just held Leo tighter and wept into his hair, the kind of tears that wash away years of silent fear. Julian stood beside them, not as an employer, not as a billionaire, but as a man who had finally learned what it means to stand for something real. He didn't stop there. He established a foundation in Leo's name, funding cardiac care for children whose families couldn't afford it. He turned the East Wing into a permanent residence for Clara and Leo, with a separate entrance so they had privacy, but a connected kitchen so they never felt alone. He even offered Clara a position as the estate's community liaison, a role that paid triple her old salary and honored her quiet resilience. She tried to refuse. He wouldn't let her. "You taught me that a house is just wood and stone until someone puts a heart inside it," he told her. "Let me return the favor." Seasons changed. The estate, once cold and echoing, began to hum with life. Leo's health improved dramatically. He learned to run without getting winded. He learned to laugh without holding back. Clara learned to trust. She stopped flinching at loud noises. She started leaving the basement door open, not out of necessity, but because she finally had the light. Julian learned to smile. He found that the greatest luxury wasn't a marble countertop or an imported car. It was the sound of a child's footsteps in the hallway. It was the quiet certainty that he was finally home. And through it all, the truth remained unshaken. Kindness doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it hides in the basement. Sometimes it's written in a quiet journal. Sometimes it's a mother's sacrifice, waiting for someone brave enough to see it. If this story reminded you that the most beautiful things in life are often hidden behind closed doors, please hit the like button. Subscribe to At Kindness Valley for more stories that celebrate compassion, resilience, and the quiet power of doing the right thing. Leave a comment below and tell me what moment stayed with you the longest. Because in a world that often measures success by what you own, never forget to measure your life by what you're willing to give. Thank you for listening, and remember, kindness is never wasted. It just waits for the right hands to carry it forward.